It is a rarely admitted fact, outside the more dramatic chapters of Trollope, that no English wedding truly deserving of its florist's invoice can unfold without some form of catastrophe. Be it a lost ring, an absent-minded bishop, or an entirely wrong groom, some small yet dreadful mishap must find its way between the bridal march and the vows, lest the event descend into the realm of mere adequacy. So, when Miss Agatha Mullan gracefully collapsed into the asparagus fern 5 minutes before her union with the Honorable Nicholas Fanshawe, the shocked attendees felt, beneath their concern, a quiet ripple of approval. At last, a proper English wedding. The village of Great Pagwell, home to one pub, 2 rectors, and no remaining industry aside from rumor, hadn't witnessed a Fanshawe wedding in decades, nor had it ever, to the best of collective memory, been honored by the elusive Lord Peter Wimsey. Contrary to expectation, he did not arrive in a stately Rolls-Royce, but on the village charabanc, having amused himself by asking the driver an absurd question about petrol economy and Georgian architecture. Wimsey, naturally, was not an invited guest. He rarely was. His appearance at the ceremony owed itself entirely to an old and almost scandalous engagement to the bride's indomitable aunt, Lady Hermione Mullan, formerly Toever. That romance had dissolved into a collection of poetic sonnets, and one unforgettable incident involving a disguised baritone and a stolen cabochon. Nevertheless, Aunt Hermione had extended the invitation. Whether from nostalgia or mischief remained unclear. Perhaps she merely hoped that his presence might jolt her gout-stricken husband into a flicker of jealousy or even a cardiac episode, either option being preferable to the man's relentless political ramblings. The event was to take place in the flower-laden nave of St. Swithin's, a chapel so quaint it had recently graced the cover of the Lady's Companion to Rustic Devotion. At the altar stood the Honorable Nicholas Fanshawe, exhibiting a posture best described as composed surrender. He was accompanied by a startlingly handsome best man, Mr. Dominic Mu, a childhood companion of the Fanshawe family and, until last year, a playwright of modest acclaim. As the bridal entrance was announced, a ripple of whispers stirred the pews. At the doorway came a swan-like hesitation, and then Miss Agatha collapsed as though she had been poorly shuffled together like a worn deck of cards. A genteel sort of chaos ensued. Lord Peter Wimsey, seated discreetly near the back and amusing himself by gauging the tower's acoustics, rose with the languid grace of a disenchanted aristocrat. He made his way forward just as the vicar cried out for a doctor, or failing that, some sherry. "Perhaps," murmured Wimsey, leaning delicately over the fainted bride, "we should delay the exchange of vows until she remembers precisely whom she intended to marry. These things benefit from clarity of consciousness." There was a stifled silence. The vicar coughed. Aunt Hermione glared. Wimsey stood and briskly dusted his gloves. "Of course," he added, eyes twinkling, "it may only be a typical case of bridal jitters. Or," he said, more brightly still, "something distinctly less convenient." An hour later, after the guests had been diplomatically ushered out with soft promises of sandwiches and explanations, Dominic's body was discovered in the vestry, face down, lifeless, and most certainly bludgeoned with the ceremonial Bible stand, its silver bindings now uncomfortably significant. Wimsey had been summoned by the sharp-tongued housekeeper, who had gone in search of spare-smelling salts and instead found murder. He entered the scene with a mild air of curiosity, as one might exhibit upon discovering spoiled milk or a forgotten umbrella. "Well," he said, removing his monocle and peering dispassionately at the crumpled figure, "that explains the bride's rather dramatic interlude. Second sight or second thoughts?" Dr. Weatherstone, who had arrived too late to do anything useful, paled at the scene. "Good heavens," he murmured. "But why would anyone kill the best man?" "Perhaps," said Wimsey thoughtfully, "because the first best man was unavailable, Or perhaps someone opposed the ceremony with more conviction than custom permits. He crouched and lifted the victim's sleeve, sniffing. Lilac water and onions. Not quite the fragrance of holy matrimony. With a sigh of wry amusement, Lord Peter turned to the small cluster now gathering at the door. Rector, Doctor, and Hermione, the groom, not as distraught as one might expect, and an increasingly overwrought bridesmaid. "Before the constabulary arrives and complicates matters," Wimsey said, "shall we begin our customary game? Who last saw the dear fellow alive? And, if you'll forgive the impertinence, was he given to quoting Euripides under stress?" He smiled that light, dazzling, and faintly exasperating smile, and drew a slim notebook from his coat. "I believe," he said, "we have a most distasteful little puzzle on our hands." Wimsey lingered by the body longer than was strictly decorous, his expression one of academic intrigue. He turned Dominic's palm upward, gently probing a smear on the cufflink with a matchstick. Behind him, the rector fluttered anxiously. "This is sacred ground," he stammered. "Courage, Reverend," murmured Wimsey. "There's no desecration here, merely inquiry. The man is beyond offense, and the room," he turned slowly, eyes scanning the cluttered chamber, "offers more oddities than reverence." He paused at a cracked stained-glass depiction of Saint Bartholomew, holding his own flayed skin with unsettling poise. Dr. Weatherstone knelt, mostly out of habit, and fumbled with his stethoscope. "Blunt force trauma to the skull," he announced unnecessarily. "Likely instant death. Heavy object. Bible stand would suffice." "An eloquent choice," Wimsey mused. "Symbolic. Murder staged amidst nuptials. Very on the nose. Has anyone," he asked the rector, "ever been martyred by ecclesiastical furniture?" Before the man could stammer a reply, Sergeant Keeling entered, a man with the expression of someone who deeply regretted professional advancement. Broad, red-faced, already perspiring. "Lord above," he muttered, eyeing the corpse. "That's M.W. The playwright?" "Among other roles," said Wimsey mildly. "Poet, confidant, now, alas, quite retired from the arts." "Who found him?" Keeling asked. "That distinction," Wimsey replied, indicating the housekeeper who now loomed like a judgmental specter, "belongs to Mrs. Rattleby. Sent to fetch more smelling salts for our delicately crumpled bride." "Right. No one leaves," Keeling barked. "I suspect most would rather flee," Wimsey said. "But those who linger may prove more enlightening." The housekeeper cleared her throat. "Begging your pardon, my lord, but I did hear something odd before I found him." "Oh," said Wimsey attentively. "Do go on." "A humming," she said. "A sort of tune. Low and slow. Couldn't place it." "Fascinating," Wimsey murmured. "Death and melody. How delightfully Wagnerian." With a flourish, he made a note. "Shall we begin with interviews? The bride is still indisposed." Keeling nodded. "Still out cold." "Then the groom," said Wimsey, voice tinged with impish anticipation. "Men left at the altar, especially without bride or best man, tend toward truth, often involuntarily. Nicholas Fanshawe was found in the sacristy, pale and sipping something that looked disturbingly like creme de menthe." He gave Wimsey a tremulous nod. "You'll want to ask about Dominic. If you'd be so kind, let's begin with the routine. When did you last see him alive?" Fanshawe blinked. "Just before the procession. We spoke in the antechapel. He adjusted my cravat and made some joke about garters." "Yours or the bride's?" Fanshawe gave a brittle laugh. "Mine, I think. He was always glib. Said a wedding without scandal was a waste of cake." "Prescient," murmured Wimsey. "Did he say anything else of note?" "He asked if I was nervous. I said yes. He clapped me on the back and said not to worry. Someone always gets cold feet." Then he went off, presumably to the vestry. "Any recent quarrels?" "No. We were close. School friends. He stayed at the manor last night." Nothing seemed off. Nothing ever does, Wimsey said. Until it does. And Miss Mullan, was she fond of him? A pause. Not especially. She found him superficial. Clever, but shallow. Playwrights often get that reputation. Did he oppose the marriage? Fanshawe hesitated. He joked about it. Said Agatha was marrying into a haunted house. My family has history. An uncle who shot himself in the conservatory. Dominic wrote a play about it once. Tasteless. Did Miss Mullan see it? She did. She hated it. Said it turned grief into theater. Indeed, said Wimsey. And yet here we are. The eastern lane, just beyond the yew hedge. There, he positioned her carefully, orienting her shoulder toward the cloister arch. Now, Wimsey said softly, nodding to Keeling. The lantern flared, casting sharp silhouettes across the path. The photograph was held up in the beam, Dominic and Nicholas side by side, taken at a garden party months earlier. As the plain chant began, low, slow, haunting, it filtered through the ivy as if drawn from memory. Tell me what you see, Wimsey said. Elvira squinted. Someone is walking, no limping. There, yes, it's just like before. Her breath caught. The coat, the walk, oh, but wait. She leaned forward. It's not Nicholas, she whispered. Are you sure? Asked Wimsey. Yes, she said slowly. He's broader across the shoulders. And the stride, there's something too rigid, as if he's mimicking a limp, not suffering one. Good, said Wimsey gently. Now look at the photograph again. She did. Her eyes narrowed. That's not Nicholas. It's oh my stars. She turned, stunned. It's the cousin. Fenella's cousin, Geoffrey. Wimsey turned to Keeling. Geoffrey Stokes. The distant cousin no one recalls too clearly. A minor actor in London, called home for the wedding. Keeling exhaled. And cousin to Elvira. Would have known about Vienna. Would have known about the manuscript. And, Wimsey added, enough about costuming and posture to imitate Nicholas in silhouette. He turned to Elvira, whose face had gone pale. Did Geoffrey and Dominic ever speak alone? I think so. After rehearsal. That strange rehearsal Dominic insisted on Thursday evening. Geoffrey was furious afterward, muttering that Dominic had humiliated him. Wimsey nodded. Thank you. That's enough. He turned toward the nave, footsteps quickening. Come, Keeling. I think it's time we found our actor and gave him his final cue. They found Geoffrey in the vicar's study, drinking sherry with practiced calm. At the sight of them, he rose, too smoothly, too readily. Evening, gentlemen, he said. A breakthrough, perhaps? Yes, Wimsey said, removing the leather folio from his coat. One might say the curtain is ready to fall. Geoffrey's smile thinned. Is that so? Wimsey stepped closer. You knew the manuscript would ruin Nicholas, yes, but it would also expose you. Dominic had added a scene, hadn't he? A confrontation, where Geoffrey reveals not Nicholas's secret, but his own, jealousy, envy, a sense of perpetual exclusion. Wimsey laid the folio gently on the table. Dominic wasn't just protecting Agatha. He was trying to show Nicholas what danger already surrounded him. And you, Geoffrey, were afraid that once Nicholas read this, he'd cut you out entirely. No money, no connections, no stage. Geoffrey's eyes flashed. He humiliated me. Yes, said Wimsey, voice quiet now. But you chose murder to silence a play, and forgot that every tragedy ends with revelation. Silence. Then Geoffrey slumped, the actor's poise finally cracking. I only meant to scare him, he said. But he wouldn't let go of the case. He shouted. We struggled. He fell. There was blood. I didn't mean. Wimsey nodded, not unkindly. Even the worst scripts begin with better intentions. Keeling stepped forward with the cuffs. Later, as the sun vanished entirely, Wimsey stood alone at the edge of the cloister path. gazing down at the now-abandoned manuscript in his hands. "One act," he murmured. "No encore." And turning away, he disappeared into the deepening dusk, where truth, like theater, was always a matter of timing. Something far more desperate? Lord Peter Wimsey stood in the quiet booth of the telephone kiosk a long moment after the line had gone dead. Clara Stein, or C. Winters. Her presence shifted everything. She had always been the quiet one in Dominic's history, the shadow in the corner of the frame. But if she had been in the village, in the rectory, the night before the murder, and had not taken the train out, then where had she gone after her morning walk? And why had no one seen her since? The truth had begun to slant, just enough to cast longer shadows. The theory Weatherstone offered, while plausible, had lacked one critical human detail: fear. Not guilt, fear. Wimsey could always tell the difference. And now he wondered, was Weatherstone protecting someone? Or had Clara caught him in the act and taken the silence for a kind of justice? Wimsey returned to his flat that evening to find a telegram waiting. From Inspector Charles Parker. Stop. Found trace of Winters at small bookshop in Lewis. Bought 3 plays including The Mirror Unmasked under real name Clara Stein. Owner says she seemed unwell, nervous, left a glove. Stop. Shall I proceed? Wimsey stared at the words. The Mirror Unmasked. Dominic's most controversial play, never staged, barely circulated, rumored to mirror his own life too closely. Clara hadn't run. She had lingered, seeking something, a message perhaps, or a meaning. Or worse, seeking a part she never got to play. "Proceed, Charles," Wimsey whispered, and tapped the telegram against his palm. "But gently. We may not be hunting a killer." He turned to the window, the city lights blinking through the fog. Somewhere out there, the truth rehearsed its lines in silence, waiting for the right audience. The curtain had not fallen after all. Not yet. Single act, Miss Netheridge. More often it is a slow unmasking, a series of silences broken and masks removed. But I suspect you already knew that. Clarice's eyes flickered, the kind of flicker Wimsey had come to associate not with fear, but calculation. "You think I had something to do with Dominic's death?" "I think you had something to protect," he replied calmly. "And protection, like guilt, comes in many shapes." She didn't deny it. Instead, she turned to the window where the rain traced delicate lines across the glass. Dominic was a friend, too idealistic for his own good. He thought truth was enough. But in our world, Lord Peter, truth is a weapon, and weapons wound. Wimsey stepped forward. "So you silenced him?" "No," she turned, voice quiet. "But I may have." Encouraged a delay. A soft hand on a louder voice. He was determined to out Clara's past, to draw blood under the pretense of art. "I warned Weatherstone. I told him things would unravel. But I didn't expect death," Wimsey supplied. She nodded. "No one did. That's the tragedy, isn't it? We all played our part, but none of us intended a corpse." Outside, a carriage passed, its wheels hissing on the wet stones. Wimsey's thoughts spun, deliberate and careful. Each person had touched the flame, but who had struck the match? Later that night, back in his rooms, he spread the case notes across the desk. Names and motives, secrets and silences. Each motive plausible. Each alibi paper thin. A tangle of lives, each knotted around the same fear: exposure. In the end, he returned to the telegram. The name underlined in red: Clara Stein. She had been the spark. Perhaps not the killer, but the fulcrum. Around her, all others had shifted. Their choices, their panic, their betrayals, all born from what she represented. The truth. He picked up his pen, hesitated, then wrote, Final addendum. Clara Stein was not a villain, nor a saint. She was the echo of a story no one wanted told. In silencing her, each of them, Agatha, Nicholas, Clarice, Weatherstone, preserved not justice but comfort. Dominic Mu died for a truth he tried to fictionalize. But the story was never his. And that, perhaps, was the fatal error. Wimsey closed the notebook for the last time. No applause, no curtain call, only the soft sigh of rain and the quiet thrum of conscience. Some cases ended with handcuffs, others with funerals. But this one ended, as all tragedies do, with silence. And quiet deals. Weatherstone, as the family physician, is a guardian of many things, some that ought to have remained hidden, such as Nicholas's voice lowered, the circumstances surrounding Clara Stein's condition. Her treatment in Vienna was not the whole story. There was a local matter long before, involving another family secret, an incident covered up by those in power. Weatherstone has been protecting more than just health records. He has been safeguarding reputations, and at times, silencing inconvenient truths. Wimsey tapped his fingers thoughtfully. I take it Dominic discovered this? Yes, Nicholas said. And that discovery cost him dearly. He threatened to expose the hidden connections between the Mullan family, Weatherstone, and Clara's past. He saw the wedding as a facade, a chance to cement silence. Yet Dominic's death was hastened by Weatherstone's hand. But you believe others conspired? Nicholas nodded slowly. There are those who preferred Dominic silenced, yes, and who might see Weatherstone as a useful shield, or convenient fall guy. Wimsey's eyes gleamed. And who precisely stands to benefit from maintaining such secrecy? Nicholas swallowed hard. Clarice Netheridge. The name hung in the room like a sudden chill. Wimsey leaned forward. Mrs. Netheridge? Yes. She has deep ties to the village's old power structures. Her first husband was a local magistrate, her second a landowner with considerable influence. She has long been the arbiter of what remains unsaid in Great Pagwell. Dominic's manuscript threatened her position. And you believe she encouraged Weatherstone? Nicholas looked away. I do. Wimsey nodded slowly, absorbing the implication. This explains much. The reluctance to name her, the careful deference she commands, and why she guards the truth as fiercely as the family crypt. Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp knock of a constable announcing a visitor. Clarice Netheridge stepped inside, composed and inscrutable as ever. Her eyes swept the room coolly before resting on Wimsey. I trust I'm not interrupting? She asked. On the contrary, Wimsey said with a bow. Your presence is most timely. She crossed to the table, folding her gloved hands. I understand there are questions. Yes, Wimsey replied. Questions that may be uncomfortable. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were steely. I've always believed the truth is a blade best wielded with care. Indeed, Wimsey said. And yet, it appears that blade has been wielded recklessly of late, resulting in Mr. Mu's death. Clarice's expression darkened. A tragedy, yes, but accidents happen in the pursuit of secrets. Accidents sometimes mask intent, Wimsey countered. Your influence over the village, your connections to the Mullan family, your presence near the time and place of the murder. These are facts. Mrs. Netheridge regarded him with the calm of a chess master contemplating a forced checkmate. And yet no evidence links me directly to the crime. Not yet, Wimsey said. But it is telling that Dominic's manuscript, implicating many, was kept from public view until it was too late. Perhaps because the manuscript was fiction, Clarice said smoothly. Exaggerated drama, written by a man eager for sensation. Or truth disguised, Wimsey said. Fiction often reveals more than it conceals. There was a long silence. Then Clarice spoke, her voice low. I wish to protect the village, the families, the legacy. Dominic's revelations threaten to unravel it all. And in doing so, Wimsey said quietly, you may have entangled yourself more deeply than intended. Clarice's composure flickered, a shadow crossing her face. I am prepared to accept responsibility for my choices, but I am no murderer. Wimsey studied her. Perhaps not directly, but you wielded influence. You shaped actions, and sometimes that is enough. She nodded slowly, the slightest trace of defeat in her posture. What would you have me do? Tell the truth, Wimsey said simply. Not for justice's sake, but for those caught in the web. Clarice's gaze met his, steady now. I will consider your counsel. As she left, Wimsey turned to Nicholas. The path to resolution is long, but it begins with confession. Nicholas exhaled the first breath of release in days. Outside, the city's hum resumed, the cacophony of life pressing forward, as always. But within the yard's walls, a quiet reckoning had begun. One that would unravel tangled loyalties, expose hidden motives, and perhaps, at last, bring peace to the shadows of Great Pagwell. Lord Peter Wimsey rose. His work was far from done, yet he was satisfied that the first true act of justice had finally begun. The final scene. The late afternoon light filtered through the heavy curtains of the interview room, casting long shadows that seemed to gather around Clarice Netheridge as she sat with deliberate composure opposite Lord Peter Wimsey. The air was thick with the unspoken weight of what was about to be said. A final reckoning, where veils would be lifted and truths laid bare. Mrs. Netheridge, Wimsey began, his voice calm yet unwavering. We have spoken of secrets and shadows, of influence wielded with care and carelessness. But now the question remains. How far did you go to protect that influence? How deeply are you entangled in the events that led to Mr. Mu's untimely death? She met his gaze steadily, unflinching. I have played my part, Lord Peter. But I am no common murderer. Dominic Mu was reckless, dangerous, and foolish. He sought to burn bridges that should have remained intact. I only sought to guard those bridges from collapsing entirely. And yet Mr. Mu lies dead, and the bridges are fractured at best, Wimsey said softly. We must consider that protection can be a mask for darker deeds. Clarice's fingers tightened on the armrest. You suspect me of orchestrating the murder? I suspect, Wimsey said, that in the labyrinth of motives and fears, your hand may have nudged events beyond control. We know Weatherstone struck the fatal blow, but it is you who wielded the dagger of secrecy and influence that set the stage. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I arranged for Weatherstone to meet Dominic that morning, yes, to warn him away from his dangerous crusade. I hoped words alone would suffice. And when words failed, I did not instruct violence, she said, her voice firmer. But I cannot deny I knew the stakes were high. Wimsey leaned forward, and Clara Stein. Her letters warn of a shadow following her. Do you deny involvement in that? Clarice shook her head slowly. I wanted her gone, for the village's peace, for Agatha's future. I admit to warnings, to persuasion, but not threats, not harm. Yet threats were made, Wimsey noted. Hence someone ensured Dominic's manuscript never saw the light. There are many who would benefit from silence, she said. I cannot speak for them all. A silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. Then Wimsey's expression softened. Mrs. Netheridge, the time for guarded facades is over. If you seek mercy, it begins with full truth. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. There was one more presence that morning, she confessed. Someone Dominic trusted more than any of us. Someone he thought might understand his intentions and protect him. And who was that? Wimsey asked, voice steady. Agatha, Clarice said quietly. Dominic sought to confide in her before revealing anything else. But fear and love twisted their bond. Agatha didn't believe him, or perhaps refused to. The truth was too heavy. Wimsey nodded. And what of Agatha's fainting? Was it merely shock? No, Clarice said. It was dread, knowing what Dominic intended, and fearing what it would unleash. Wimsey's gaze sharpened. Then the tragedy lies not just in death, but in silence and mistrust. Clarice's hands unclenched. Yes, he stood slowly, signaling the end of their interview. Thank you, Mrs. Netheridge. Your candor brings us closer to closure. As she was escorted away, Wimsey felt a familiar mix of satisfaction and melancholy. The final act was unfolding, but with it came the realization that some wounds remain open, and some truths come at a high cost. Back in the quiet corridors of the yard, Wimsey prepared his report, detailing the complex web of motives, fears, and loyalties that culminated in the tragic death of Dominic Mu. He included Clarice's confession, Nicholas's fears, Agatha's silent struggles, and Weatherstone's fatal panic. His concluding note was brief and poignant. Justice has many faces, some merciful, some harsh. The second-best man paid the price for secrets too tightly held. May those left behind find the courage to speak freely and the grace to forgive.